They smiled at me from the front row, my parents beaming like proud supporters, and I smiled back as I handed them a sealed envelope. Not a thank you card, not a graduation photo, but a lawsuit for stealing my name and burying it under $150,000 of debt. Hi, I'm Lauren. I graduated with honors, a hollow bank account, and a truth I could no longer swallow. They used my identity for years. I paid their bills, missed my meals, and stayed silent until that day. You want to know what finally broke me? It wasn't the money, it was realizing they never planned to stop. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments, and if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way I can send you a special greeting. Now let's start the story together. They called my name, and the crowd clapped like it meant something. I walked across the stage with my hands steady, my face still. The diploma folder felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried something more than paper, something I couldn't quite name yet. The sun pressed down hard on the concrete steps outside the auditorium. Families were everywhere, hugging, crying, posing with bouquets. I stood to the side, smiling for no one in particular, the corner of my lips pulled up just enough not to look out of place. My parents were there, of course, Robert and Marissa Chen. My father wore his navy golf polo, sleeves too tight around his arms, and he kept shouting my name like it was his victory. My mother had styled her hair into perfect waves and dabbed foundation that didn't quite match her neckline. She clapped delicately, her eyes scanning the crowd more than they ever really landed on me. Nina found me as I was walking down the ramp, holding a paper cup of lukewarm punch. "You need to see this," she whispered, slipping a sealed envelope into my hand. I blinked. "Now?" "Now," she said, her voice low but steady. I ducked behind the auditorium into the shadow of a concrete column. I could still hear a toddler crying nearby and someone singing off-key to a Bluetooth speaker. I broke the seal on the envelope, unfolded the printed report. Credit lines, personal loans, credit cards, some in my name alone. Some jointly opened with my social security number, dates stretching back years. I felt my lungs flatten. I counted the accounts, 8 in total. I had opened none of them. And then the total at the bottom, $147,891.22. The folder in my other hand, my diploma, suddenly felt like a joke. I'd worked for 6 years, took extra credits, skipped spring breaks, spent summers tutoring high schoolers and closing at the campus bookstore. I sent money home every month, groceries, co-pays, an extra 100 here and there when things were tight. I thought I was building something, that even if no one ever said thank you, it still meant something. That family, if nothing else, was a net. I didn't know I'd been used as a scaffold. My stomach turned, not out of anger yet, but confusion, dread. From the corner of the building, I watched my father laugh with a man in a wrinkled suit. He held up his phone like he was proud of something, maybe a photo of me. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the tone. He loved to speak in victories, especially the ones that didn't cost him. My mother reached for the camera next. She gestured for me to join them. I waved, held up one finger, 1 minute, and ducked back around the side. I needed to breathe. It wasn't just the debt, it was the shape of it, how it fit so neatly alongside the things they never said, the gratitude they never voiced. I thought about last fall, when my dad's truck broke down and I wired $600 without hesitation, the week I missed 2 meals to make rent, or the time I canceled my weekend off to help Mom navigate an insurance form. I didn't need applause, but I needed not to be erased. I walked slowly to the refreshment table, picked up a melting vanilla cupcake. The frosting was slumped to one side, the paper liner damp with condensation. I stood there holding it, unsure whether to take a bite or just watch it collapse. Nina approached again. "You okay?" "No," I said quietly, "but I will be." She stood with me for a while, didn't press, just waited. I saw my parents again through the crowd. They were smiling for a woman with a camera. Marissa tilted her head at the right angle. Robert adjusted his collar. It was the same posture they used at my high school graduation, the same when they came to parent weekend freshman year and left early to catch a flight deal. They always showed up just long enough to say they had. This time, I didn't walk over. Instead, I turned to Nina. "Can you take a picture of me?" "Of course," she said. I stood alone by the fountain. No cap, no smile, just the cupcake in one hand and the credit report in the other, slightly folded at the corners. She clicked once, then again. I looked straight into the lens, not with pride, not yet, but with clarity. The crowd cheered again for someone else's name, a girl with flowers in both arms crying with joy. I glanced at the diploma still tucked under my arm, then at the report. "I just graduated," I whispered, mostly to myself. But from what, exactly? They told me it was just a way to build credit. "Everyone does it," my father said, waving the pen like it was no big deal. I was 18, still unpacking boxes in my freshman dorm room when he slid the paperwork across my desk. "It's just for gas and groceries," he assured me. "You won't even notice it." I didn't question him. Why would I? He had that calm voice, the kind that made you feel silly for hesitating. And Marissa, my mother, stood by the door, nodding like this was normal, like I was lucky to have parents looking out for me. I signed. That signature would go on to appear on things I never saw again. Credit cards, store accounts, even a lease application. But at the time, I thought I was being responsible, mature, useful. The first few months, nothing changed. I still worked 2 shifts at the campus cafe and reviewed my bank statements late at night, eating cereal out of a coffee mug. I sent home a little extra when Mom said she was short on groceries or Dad's prescription had gone up again. It felt good, in a strange way, like proof I was doing something right. By sophomore year, my hours increased. I took on tutoring for freshmen in the evenings, picked up weekend shifts at a bookstore downtown. The calls from home became more frequent, not with panic, just expectation. "The power bill was higher this month," my mom would say. "You don't have to help, but your father's been so stressed." So I'd help. I remember once, in February of 2021, sitting on the floor in my tiny apartment with canned soup warming on a hot plate. I had just wired $300 so my dad could fix his car's radiator. The note in the transfer said, "Don't worry about paying me back." He didn't. When I told Nina I couldn't go out for coffee that weekend, she asked why. I said money was tight, brushing it off with a laugh. She didn't laugh. "You've been saying that a lot," she said. "You work 2 jobs." I shrugged. "It's just temporary. My parents need some help." That's when she tilted her head just a little, not accusing, just watching me differently. By junior year, I started noticing things. Bounce charges, calls from numbers I didn't recognize, a credit alert I couldn't explain, but I blamed myself. Maybe I'd overspent. Maybe I'd missed a payment. That summer, I tried to apply for a small student loan for a study abroad program. It got denied. The counselor looked at me with polite concern. "Your credit utilization is unusually high," he said. "You might want to review your accounts." I nodded, heart racing, pretending to understand. I didn't mention it to anyone, not even Nina. I kept thinking, this can't be what it looks like. My parents wouldn't do that. They'd always said how proud they were of me, how I was their hope, their investment. But by senior year, I stopped feeling proud. I stopped feeling anything. There was a missed birthday, no card, no call. Just a voicemail from my mom a day later saying, "Sorry, we've been busy. You know how things get." I remember staring at my screen, watching the seconds tick on the message. I had just finished paying for their internet bill because they couldn't lose access during tax season. They never said thank you. One night, Nina came into our apartment to find me sitting on the floor, my laptop open to a spreadsheet of every expense I'd covered since freshman year. "Lauren," she said gently, "what are you doing?" "I'm trying to make sense of it," I whispered, trying to understand how it got this far. I showed her everything. The charges, the notes, the pattern. She went quiet, then asked, Do you know about this one?" She pointed to a $25,000 personal loan opened 2 years earlier, co-signed with my Social Security number. I stared at it. I didn't recognize the lender. I didn't recognize the date. I felt the breath leave my body in slow, cold waves. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't accidental. This was built, layer by layer, on the assumption that I would never ask, that I would always choose silence over confrontation. I looked at Nina. Her eyes were steady. "You need a lawyer." I shook my head. "Not yet. I need to know if they'll admit it first." The roast smelled like it always did, overcooked, stiff around the edges. Marissa had laid out the same chipped plates with faded blue flowers. The canned corn sat in a plastic bowl, untouched, and the mashed potatoes looked like they'd given up somewhere between stovetop and table. The wall clock ticked with a kind of purpose, like it was waiting for someone to break the silence. I sat between the sound of that ticking and the heaviness in my chest. Robert cleared his throat, slicing his meatloaf with the wrong side of the knife, pretending not to notice the folder in my lap. Marissa folded and refolded her napkin, eyes on her plate. I didn't ease into it. "I got a copy of my credit report," I said. No reaction. "There are 8 open accounts in my name. Some go back to freshman year." Still nothing. I slid the folder onto the table. The papers made a soft slap against the wood. Robert didn't even blink. He picked up his fork. "We had no choice," he said, voice steady. "We couldn't qualify for anything." Marissa let out a short sigh, like I had just knocked over a glass of water. "It's just numbers, sweetheart," she said gently. "Why would you ruin everything over that?" I looked between them, Robert chewing, Marissa patting her napkin again. "There's a $25,000 personal loan I never knew about," I said. "It's been accruing interest for almost 2 years." "It was for the house," Robert said. "I didn't agree to it." "You didn't say no either," he said, eyes finally meeting mine. I leaned back in my chair. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" Neither of them answered. My mother picked up her glass of water but didn't drink. My father went back to his plate. The wall clock ticked, and the silence thickened like gravy left too long on the stove. I stood slowly. The chair legs scraped against the floor. I walked to the doorway, then stopped. I pulled a sealed envelope from my coat pocket and placed it gently next to the salt shaker. Inside was a full copy of the credit report. "You made me responsible for everything," I said, "but not this." Robert didn't move. Marissa kept folding her napkin. I stepped outside into the cool air. The wind caught the hem of my jacket, and I let it pull without resistance. In the car, I sat for a moment with the engine off. The house lights glowed through the kitchen window, a dim yellow behind the curtains. I opened my phone. One message. I typed, "I'm ready," then hit send. Nina replied in seconds. "Good, I've been waiting." The sun came up hard and fast over Tucson, casting long shadows over rows of white folding chairs. Banners fluttered above the stage, class of 2023, while the loudspeaker crackled every few minutes with someone's full name and a wave of clapping. I stood behind the curtain with the rest of my row, cap on, palms dry, not nervous, just prepared. A kind of quiet readiness had settled into my bones, the kind you feel not before a fight, but before a truth. "They're in the front row," Nina whispered behind me. Marissa brought her big sunglasses. I smiled slightly. That sounded about right. When they called my name, I stepped forward. Not too fast, not too slow. One foot in front of the other, tassel bouncing lightly as the announcer mispronounced my last name. I shook hands, took the diploma, smiled at the flash of a camera I didn't care to find. Then I turned. Most people returned to their seat after they crossed, but not me. I walked down the short steps from the stage and across the center aisle, where the first row of families sat clutching phones and flower bouquets. My parents were exactly where I expected them. Center left, second, and third seats. Marissa waved. Robert had his phone out, angling for a picture. I stopped in front of them. I reached into my gown pocket and pulled out a slim, sealed envelope. "Happy graduation," I said calmly. Marissa blinked. Robert furrowed his brow, lowering the phone just enough to meet my eyes. "What is this?" he asked, already sensing something was off. "Civil complaint," I said, "for identity theft and financial exploitation." He froze. I placed the envelope in his hand, firm, deliberate. Then turned to Marissa and nodded just once. She didn't move. The applause from the last student hadn't fully faded. A baby cried somewhere behind me. Balloons squeaked against each other in the wind. Robert stood slowly. "Lauren, what are you doing?" His voice was sharp but quiet, not loud enough to make a scene. That was his specialty. Outrage concealed in manners. I looked him straight in the eye. "Accountability." I didn't wait for a reply. I walked past the stunned faces, past the half-held cameras, past the scattered petals and confetti in waiting. I walked with both feet grounded and my breath steady. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I walked until I reached the edge of the crowd and found Nina standing beside the food tables, her phone lowered now, still recording but not pointing directly at anything. "You okay?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "I'm fine," I said. She nodded once. "It's done." Behind us, a woman gasped, not loudly, but just enough. "Isn't that the Chen girl?" someone murmured. I kept walking. There were cupcakes lined up near the exit, brightly colored, melting slightly in the heat. One had a cracked swirl of pink frosting sliding sideways, like it had given up on holding form. I picked it up out of habit. Didn't bite into it. Just held it in one hand, diploma in the other. People smiled at me as I passed, the way you smile at any graduate. They didn't know. Not yet. But they would. Nina trailed beside me quietly, close enough that I could feel her presence, but far enough not to crowd me. She didn't offer congratulations. She didn't say, "Good job." She didn't have to. We reached the far end of the courtyard by a row of shaded trees where the light filtered in softer. I stopped there, turned around. Nina lifted her phone and took a photo. No cap this time, no forced smile, just me, standing straight, holding what was mine and what had been done to me. I didn't pose, didn't blink, let the camera catch me how I really was. When I turned back toward the road, I didn't look for my parents again. They'd always said graduation was the day they'd be proud. I made sure they'd never forget it. They didn't call me, they called Facebook. 3 days after graduation, I woke to Nina standing in the kitchen with her laptop open, eyes fixed, jaw clenched. She didn't say good morning, just turned the screen toward me. "Your mom posted this at 6:14 a.m., she said. "Town Facebook group, Cedar Falls Community." There it was, a photo of my mother sitting under a blanket in the living room, face turned slightly away, hand pressed to her temple, like a scene from a low-budget soap opera. The caption above it, all bold font and no punctuation, read, "When your own child sues you instead of showing gratitude." I scrolled. They had written it together. I could hear both their voices in every sentence. Robert's heavy-handed phrasing, "We gave her everything we had." Marissa's theatrics, "Now we sit in silence, lights off, wondering what we did wrong." Below the text were hundreds of reactions. Thumbs up, sad faces, angry emojis. The comment section read like a slow-motion pile-up. So disrespectful. "Kids these days don't know what sacrifice means." "Your daughter sounds heartless." Nina scrolled with 2 fingers, reading aloud. "They're painting you as a monster," she said, "and people are believing it." I said nothing. The truth had always been private, lived in spreadsheets and sleepless nights, in whispered calls and automatic transfers. My pain didn't have pictures. My exhaustion wasn't photogenic. My sacrifice didn't come with hashtags. But theirs did. I stood and walked to the hallway closet, pulled down the blue folder I'd labeled in marker weeks ago, what I carried. I placed it on the table, flipped it open. First, the electric bills, 3 years' worth, all under my name. Auto payments, overdraft charges, then the insurance summary, 3 vehicles bundled under my policy, bank transfer screenshots, hundreds of dollars to mom, urgent, dad medical, house repair, a photo printed on matte paper, me on the roof during a drizzle, hammer in one hand, soaked through, taken by Mr. Daniels, the neighbor with the beagle. I took a deep breath. "Are you posting it?" Nina asked. I nodded. Every line? Every single one. I didn't write with venom, just precision. I didn't walk away from my family. I walked away from being erased. I attached images, dates, receipts. I didn't ask for sympathy. I offered clarity. I ended the post with one line: "Silence protects lies." I choose to breathe. Then I hit post. We sat quietly for the first few minutes, watching. Then the notifications started. A former high school teacher. She tutored kids in the library every summer, paid for her parents' prescriptions. A neighbor. She fixed the roof by herself during the storm last fall. I saw it. My RA from sophomore year. She gave up a study abroad scholarship because her dad needed dental work. And then, from someone I hadn't spoken to since freshman year, she didn't leave. She survived. The comments piled up, not in anger, but in defense, in quiet truth-telling. It felt like air coming in through a window I hadn't realized was sealed shut. For years, I thought telling my story would make me small, selfish, dramatic, disloyal. But now, each word was a thread I'd been tangled in, and by naming them, one by one, I let them go. Nina touched my shoulder lightly. "You're breathing different," she said. "I know." That afternoon, I got a message, not on social media, but in my inbox, an email. Subject, "Just read your post," from Professor Linda Holloway. Body, Lauren. "If you're ever ready to apply to grad school, I'd like to talk. I've got a spot waiting." I stared at it for a while. Not because I doubted it was real, but because, for the first time, I didn't need to ask for permission. I closed my laptop. The sun had shifted. Light was falling through the window just right. Soft, steady. My phone buzzed again, but I let it ring. Let it all ring. The walls were still a little bare, but the quiet suited me. My new apartment sat on the 3rd floor of a sun-washed building just outside downtown. The rent wasn't cheap, but it was mine. A studio with creaky floors, mismatched curtains, and a view of the alley that bloomed with dandelions after summer rain. I signed the lease in August, 2 months after graduation, and updated my mailing address. That small act, writing my name next to a new zip code, felt like drawing a line in the sand. They had taught me to endure. I had taught myself how to walk away. I stuck notes around the fridge, nothing poetic, just reminders in my own handwriting. Dinner by 7. Water the plant. You're allowed to rest. Each one chipped away at the noise I used to live inside. Jenny called that Thursday. She was brisk, efficient as always, but I heard something close to pride in her voice. "We filed the counterclaim," she said. "The judge approved the identity protection motion. You're safe to move forward. If they respond, we'll handle it." I thanked her, then let the silence settle after we hung up. I didn't need to explain anything to anyone. That same afternoon, I found a small envelope in my mailbox. No name, no stamp. Just soft blue paper folded once. Inside, handwritten in neat script, "You were never the problem. Some people just fear what they can't control." No signature. I pinned it above my desk with a thumbtack next to the photo Nina took of me after I handed them the lawsuit. There was something beautiful about not knowing who sent it. It meant someone saw me, even from a distance, and decided to say the one thing I'd once begged to hear. Later that night, Nina stopped by with Thai food and 2 iced coffees. She didn't say much, just handed me the food and collapsed onto the secondhand couch like it belonged to her. "You look different," she said eventually, half teasing, "like someone who sleeps through the night." I smiled. "I do." She raised her cup in a mock toast. "To peace. To peace. I echoed. After she left, I lit a small candle, the last one from my 23rd birthday, the one no one had touched. I placed it in the center of the tiny table, let the flame flicker across the stillness of the room. I didn't make a wish, just whispered softly, "Thank you for not giving up." Then I turned to my laptop. A new email waited in my inbox. Subject, scholarship notification. I clicked it open. "Congratulations, your application has been accepted. Fall session begins September 4th. I stared at the screen, not with disbelief, but with something quieter, relief. Not because the world had changed, but because I had. They said I owed them my life, but I built one of my own, and this one, I wouldn't apologize for. Looking back, I didn't just move out of a house. I stepped out of a pattern that once taught me love and silence were the same thing. But real love, I've learned, doesn't ask you to disappear to prove your worth. Sometimes the hardest part isn't leaving. It's choosing to stop apologizing for being the one who carried too much for too long. Family should never be built on guilt, but on respect, honesty, and care that lifts instead of weighs. If this story reminds you of something you've lived or left behind, feel free to share your thoughts. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.